Ghost in the Shell is not only one of the most popular anime in the history of cinema, but also a crucial work in the cyberpunk genre, which can only be compared in recognizability to Blade Runner or The Matrix. Just like a decade before, Akira Katsuhira Atomo's film, Mamoru Oshii, became an entry point to the world of Japanese animation for many Western viewers. Ghost in the Shell tells the story of a not-so-distant future in which advanced neuro-implant technologies allow humans to connect their brains with electronic devices. The 9th Police Division, where the main protagonist Motoko Kusanagi works, deals with cybercrimes. The plot follows the team's mission to stop a mysterious hacker called Puppet Master, who hacks implants and poses a significant threat to national security. Despite its modest runtime of only 80 minutes, the first Ghost in the Shell is a real gem in its genre. It intertwines dreams of the future, complex philosophical issues, and political reflections. It is no wonder that Mamoru Oshii's masterpiece is talked about almost more than other classic anime. In this video essay, we will try to understand whether Ghost in the Shell is indeed a nearly perfect example of cyberpunk. We will also explore how The Matrix was born out of Oshii's film and why the first part of Ghost in the Shell is unlike anything that followed in the franchise. Although some works displayed typical cyberpunk traits before, the genre was established only in the 1980s, mainly in literature. The father of cyberpunk is traditionally considered to be the writer William Gibson, author of the futuristic novel Neuromancer. It was in his review of the book that the well-known form of the genre emerged: high-tech, low-life, meaning high technology but low living standards. In the early 1980s, the first major example of cyberpunk in cinema appeared Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. Critics tried to fit Scott's film into the noir tradition out of habit, but it quickly became clear that it was a phenomenon of a different order. Although essentially accurate, cyberpunk also speaks about social crises and political instability exacerbated by the growth of large corporations and technological progress. At the same time as Blade Runner, the genre was making a name for itself in the East. In Japan, Katsuhiro Otomo's manga Akira began to be released. For the country, the 80s were a time of economic boom, so the publication of the Dark Akira turned out to be untimely. The crisis in Japan broke out only 10 years later, when the first part of Ghost in the Shell appeared. Formally, the anime Ghost in the Shell is an adaptation of the manga of the same name by Masamune Shirow, but the difference between them is much greater than their similarities. Shirow wrote a comedic cyberpunk procedural with small, self-contained plots, eccentric characters, and abundant conspiracy theories. And Oshii removed all the lightness and turned the comedy about the struggle against cyber-terrorism into a complex drama. Only the characters, certain scenes, and some lines of dialogue remain from the literary source in the film. The futuristic setting pushes cyberpunk authors towards difficult questions about the boundaries of humanity, the politics of the future, and the rationality of machines. Therefore, the genre logically became a field for philosophical reflection. Ghost in the Shell only superficially resembles a police thriller about chasing a cunning criminal. In reality, Mamoru Oshii made a detective story about the search for identity. The main character, Major Motoko Kusanagi, a cyborg with a human brain and a cyberized body, quickly begins to doubt her own humanity. The central intrigue of the film becomes not the capture of a dangerous terrorist, but whether the Major will be able to find herself and figure out whether she is more human or machine. In cyberpunk noir, the main character, often emotionally unavailable people, can be revealed through secondary characters they encounter in the plot. Taking on a case, the hero almost certainly will be confronted with an emotion they had successfully suppressed before. We see this in Ghost in the Shell 2, for example, when listening to the interrogation of a garbage man who was implanted with false memories, Kusanagi begins to doubt her own memory. In this scene, the heroine's face is reflected in the glass, as if taking the place of the detainee. This is how Oshii illustrates the inner monologue. In the famous opening scene, Kusanagi in optical camouflage dissolves into the urban landscape. This is not only an impressive visual solution but also an indication that she is a part of the city and a precise anticipation of the finale. In the scene of the protagonist's awakening, the cityscape outside the window significantly contrasts with the desert darkness of the room. The ordinary interior allows us to understand something about the character's personality, but Major's everyday life remains literally shrouded in darkness. However, Major is a mystery not only to the audience but also to herself, as indicated by several scenes, such as the episode of immersion underwater. In psychology, the sea abyss usually symbolizes the unconscious, and in this case, this intimate scene not only brings the viewer closer to the heroine but also becomes a moment of her self-discovery. It is no coincidence that her reflection reappears in this scene. Simultaneously, the scene in the bay resembles a deadly serious beach episode, a common situation in anime when the plot stops, and the characters just relax at the seaside or in the pool and talk. It is precisely at this moment that Major's partner, Batu, tries to have a heart-to-heart conversation with the main character. At the visual level, the episode of immersion mirrors the scene of Major's creation at the beginning of the film, which is edited in such a way that it looks like a dream that the protagonist has just woken up from. The fragment with the assembly of the cyborg is essential not only in the context of the character's existential quest but also as another example of identity loss. The point is that all high-tech upgrades in the employees' bodies in the department belong to the state, and since they are almost completely cyborgized, they themselves, apart from the soul, are the property of the country. As in noir cyberpunk, the film always critically addresses government institutions and large corporations. The convergence of big capital and supervisory state creates a situation of total lack of freedom, and personal independence from large structures becomes the main value in such a case. It is noteworthy that the puppet master, like the garbage collector, also turns out to be a doppelganger of the main heroine and unites them in their quest to break free from the confines of material existence and the predetermined destinies assigned by someone else, becoming something greater. The world of cyberpunk often serves as a melting pot for cultures. In fictional worlds, the high and the low, Europe and Asia, the old and the new can coexist on an equal footing, and this is usually expressed on different levels in the design of the world, music, or dialogues. In the film Ghost in the Shell, for example, the puppet master quotes a passage from the Bible to the characters. By the way, Ingmar Bergman took the title for the first part of his trilogy through a glass darkly from this line, and closer to the finale, there is a reference to the famous shot from the silence, the final part of Bergman's Faith trilogy. Having found herself in the body of a puppeteer, Kusanagi literally sees herself from the outside. The Major encounters her doppelgangers throughout the film, and we see them most prominently in the well-known scene of cruising through the city to the music of Candy Kawaii. The people whom the heroine looks at are either ominous doubles of the Major, possible variations of her life, or mannequins with whom she feels no kinship. This interlude in the whirlpool of city lights begins neatly at the 33rd minute, once again underlining the remarkable precision of the entire construction. The composition entitled Creation of a Cyborg mixes the harmonies of Bulgarian folk songs, modern synthesized sound, and a text of a wedding ceremony in Old Japanese performed by a choir. To achieve greater meditativeness, Oshii eschews overly dynamic scenes that one might expect from a sci-fi action movie. The battles and chases are edited quite minimally, and the viewer sometimes watches what is happening from a distance, not identifying with the characters. The director even allows himself to interrupt a chase scene with a lyrical shot of the city. The same applies to the musical accompaniment. The soundtrack does not increase tension, but exists as if detached from the visual sequence. On the contrary, it lowers it. For example, in the scene of a shootout with a tank, a relaxing ambient track plays, which does not match what is happening on the screen. The image of the city in the design of the fictional megapolis is no less important in the movie. It is evident how the new is literally being built on top of the old. The architecture combines the historical corners of Tokyo, the business towers of Hong Kong, the slums of Kowloon, and futuristic landscapes. On one hand, Oshii showcases the polyphony of themes through this juxtaposition, but on the other hand, he also portrays the loneliness of the individual in the modern megapolis, highlighting their insignificance in the vast city. The eclectic urban architecture vividly illustrates the complex psychological life of the heroine, where in the cyborg, various artificial and organic parts coexist in a strange way. The science-fictional construct of the ghost in the shell would not work without a religious foundation, specifically Shintoism, according to which everything has a soul, including objects and robots. According to Shinto teachings, the soul of the deceased goes through several stages in the afterlife on the way to complete merger with the ancestors. In its own way, the movie plays with this idea, showcasing the lightly cyberized Tagusa in the 9th Division, who is noticeably augmented but has not lost his humanity, and Kusanagi, who becomes part of a unified digital life at some point. Therefore, there are many fragments in the film shot from the perspective of a virtual camera and with many unnatural angles, allowing us to see the world of the film from a non-human perspective. In the finale, the Major quotes another line from the letter to the Corinthians. It comes just before the one we hear from the puppet master. The logic of Ghost in the Shell suggests that the new form of life that emerges closer to the end of the movie is a new stage of evolution that will replace humanity. Oshii ironically points this out in the climactic scene, where a tank shoots the tree of life that crowns a man.